You're right. I'm the chief investment officer for a company called BDX. And BDX is an owner and operator of data centers. We are an Asia-focused data center company owned by an infrastructure investor, which is called I Squared. And BDX currently, it's a 5-year old company. We are currently in 5 countries. We have 18 data centers and about 30 odd edge sites. We manage about 100 megawatt of IT capacity. Just to give you my background, I'm based in Singapore. Right now I'm Jakarta, but I'm, based in Singapore. I've been in Singapore for nearly 21 years now. I grew up in India, studied in India, did my engineering in IIT Varanasi, then did my MBA from a B school called SP Jain in finance. And then I joined Kotak Mahindra, which at that point of time was a joint venture with Goldman Sachs in India back in 99. And just to give you a little bit of background, at that point, this is about 1.5 years before the dot-com bust happened, back in, which was in 2000, 2001. Of course, we were not a tech-focused investment bank. We are a general investment bank in India. This was also the time in which India had already opened up about 10 years back, but a lot of public companies were being privatized through IPOs. And so there was a lot of action in India at that point of time, especially around the capital markets. And it was the perfect time to join. On the one side, I saw the dot-com industry kind of imploding. At the same time, we saw how a lot of big Indian companies were coming to the market, especially the state-owned companies were coming to the market. So it was, good foundation. Spent about 4 years in India, and then I moved to Goldman in Singapore. Spent about a year there, and then I moved to Merril Lynch, which went on to become Bank of America, Merril Lynch, and then now Bank of America. I was with Merril Lynch / Bank of America for about 13 years. I ended up heading corporate finance for them. And what that basically meant was for these 13 years, I was doing a lot of mergers and acquisitions, a lot of capital market listings, a lot of equity and debt work, structured debt, etc. So different types of products in the investment banking gamut and across sectors. So I had the opportunity to work not just in TMT, but telecom and media and technology, but also real estate, consumer, healthcare, different sectors. Southeast Asia, being an interesting market, which is made up of different, countries. So I had the opportunity to work in Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, Thailand, in addition to Singapore. So I did that for 13 years, personally grew to end up heading corporate finance. I joined as an associate, grew up to head corporate finance. Then in 2017, I left. I started a small boutique advisory firm, which was focused on digital infrastructure, which basically means, towers, fiber, and data centers. We ended up doing some, really unique, innovative transactions early in the journey of our advisory firm. And that kind of led to several other transactions in the data center space. And so, for about 3 or 4 years, we were considered one of the primary investment banks. Even though it was a very small boutique advisory firm, we were considered one of the prime investment banks, advisory firms in the space. And around that time, we ended up selling this advisory firm to a large consulting firm called Delta Partners, which eventually got sold to FTI. So we became part of a very large group, FTI, which is a listed company, about $4 billion of market cap, and we became their investment bank. I, continued with FTI till about 2022. So about 5 years from the time I had started my firm and then, selling it to FTI, then continued in FTI for about 3 years. And then in 2022, after having worked and, did a lot of data center transactions, got to know I Squared. For some time, for a few months, was an advisor to I Squared, and then joined BDX, which is a portfolio company of I Squared, as the chief investment officer. and just taking back, uh, so it's been an interesting journey. It's been a journey which I spent a lot of it doing sell side. And look, happy to explain any of these terms that you're not familiar with, but a lot of sell-side investment banking, and then over a period of time, starting something on my own, and then moving over to what I do now, which is buy side.
Okay. Well, yeah, so you've had
Yeah,
like quite an evolution in your career, basically, like pretty long journey
yeah,
to where you are
it
now.
has been 25 years.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been a very long journey. So I'm at the other end of the spectrum from where you are.
Sorry?
I said I'm on the other end of the spectrum from where you
Yeah.
are. You're just
Yeah.
beginning your journey.
We're
I'm
only at the start, right?
probably yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So look, I mean, um, I I was in your shoes at one point of time, and well, back in the day when you were in grade 12 or grade 11, we had no idea of, what we wanted to do in life, to be very frank. And in India, there were basically broadly two routes one took. If you are a science student, you either became a doctor or you became an engineer.
Right.
And um, taking the joint entrance exam of IIT was kind of a path that was the most obvious path for me. My dad's from IIT, so and he's a naval architect. He's been an IIT topper, so it was kind of almost written that I would be joining IIT. I joined IIT and studied civil engineering for 4 years. Then ended up my first job was actually Infosys, which at that point of time was an up and coming company. Um, and I was all set to join Infosys. I think the first posting was somewhere in the US. Infosys was a great company to join, great brand to join at that point of time. This is, 97 I'm talking about. But a lot of very close friends some of them who did not get good jobs, wanted to take the CAT, which is the exam for IIMs. I did not take it seriously, did not do well, did not get through the written, but was under tremendous peer pressure because a lot of my friends were doing MBA. So just chose the one exam that was remaining, which was SPGen, and then joined SPGen. So it was pretty much peer pressure, lack of planning, lack of kind of any direction, to be honest. But thankfully, career panned out in some in doing some very interesting stuff. At that time, one didn't plan, right? I mean,
Yeah.
we were so literally Infosys it wasn't like I wanted to become a software engineer.
Hmm.
Infosys were literally the first company that came to campus. And you just focused on the short term, right? I just, got through the interviews and the tests, etc., and just got the job. Um, SPGen, like I said, was the only MBA entrance exam remaining after CAT, which I had not prepared for, and then got through that. Finance was something that I was interested in, but after I had finished finance, I literally applied to 5 different jobs of different types. So the 5 jobs that I had applied for was Kotak Mahindra investment banking, Coca-Cola marketing,
Oh,
IDFC development finance. There was GECAP, which was like a consumer finance company, and Standard Chartered corporate banking. So really different types, and I made it through 4 out of the 5, and just chose Kotak Mahindra because it was investment banking, and investment banking was just had a little bit of an aura around it, basically. But and just going back, my advice to anybody who's thinking of doing an MBA would be don't do it without any job experience. You appreciate it. I was in a batch of 132. There were only 3 students who did not have job experience when we joined MBA. So MBA is something that one has to do with job experience. So these are things that one learns and one looks back and one learns. But look, you're right. I was lucky that things worked out, and one maybe it was luck, maybe I just adapted myself, etc. But luck definitely had got to do with it, where you end up joining a team, joining a firm which is in the middle of so much action, and then you get an opportunity to come to Singapore, and that just lands on your lap, and then you try. Of course, every step of the way there's competition, but luck also plays a big factor around it. Sure. I mean, look, firstly, I think that there is a lot of learning that you do when you're in the job, right? And it is extremely important to um, join a good team, have people around you who invest in you, who teach you, who are patient with you. Of course, the you kids are probably um, much more tooled, and you're much more ready than we were at that point of time. I mean, there were simple things like even proficiency with Excel, or how to put a slide together. Those were things that were relatively new. They just come secondhand, but those are some of the basic tools that you need. And just the awareness, for example, of what an investment bank does, what are the different types of jobs within an investment bank, what are the different sides of an investment bank, what is a sell side role versus buy side role, what are the different types of buy side roles. I mean, what is beyond an investment bank? Like, beyond investment banking and consulting, there are tech companies now that are popular, that you want to join. A lot of kids now don't want to join a firm; they want to do a startup, and those kind of options were there, but it was a little bit uh, out of the ordinary, much more out of the ordinary. It was not mainstream, and so in terms of challenges, look. I would say that, initial part of the career, there's a big learning curve, or was a big learning curve, which probably is slightly less steep now, because you're equipped with a lot more these days, out of the starting line. Along the way, when I came to Singapore, that was literally the second time I had stepped out of India. So, and to come to Singapore was a big move at that point. This back in 2004. I mean, nowadays, everyone's taking a holiday. You kids have grown up, taking holidays in different countries. By the time you are finishing your grade 12, you've already visited at least 10 countries, right? So it's not a big leap of faith for kids these days. It was at that point of time. Settling down in a completely international environment. India was pretty closed at that point of time. The number of people moving in and out of India were very rare, and it used to happen, but not as much. So, to come and settle down in Singapore in a much more international environment, adopt ourselves to, and this is, I moved to Singapore when I was 30. So you're much older. I was married. I didn't have a child at that point of time, but we were married. So it was a big move, and so personally, there have been challenges. I mean, I have to say, professionally, things have been really good. And, I've just been very lucky to always be in good teams, working with good people, having very exciting things to do, learning new things all the time. Even today, I moved into a buy side role only 2 years back, at the age of 49. And it's very exciting. It's a completely different perspective from a sell side role. Is, you're just selling stuff. So you're effectively trying to just do the transaction, just make the sale. When you're buying, you are investing. So you're basically, you look at things a little bit more closely, a lot more closely. You look at things much more long term. You live with the consequences of your decisions. You just don't make a fee and then move on. So it's a different perspective. But the point is that, the exciting thing is that one is still learning, and one is still getting up and getting excited to go to work. So that's what it is. I mean, challenges are there even today. Nothing is easy, and you've got different kinds of challenges. You've got different difficult people that you have to deal with. You've got difficult situations that you got to deal with. You've got things that you got to you're not familiar with. You're learning, etc. Every transaction is very difficult. You're always competing. You're in a sector where There are too many players. So, the differentiations are not as clear. So you're, kind of also selling, even though you're buying, you're also kind of selling yourself as a good buyer. So these are challenges, but these are the exciting challenges. So look, just broadly speaking, when an investment bank, or what used to be at one point of time a merchant bank, um, is an advisor, and generally, so there are buy side investment banks get buy side roles and sell side roles. But the ideal situation for an investment bank is to get a sell side role. And why is that? That is because if a transaction gets done, then the sell side banker will always get paid. So all you're trying to do is to make the fee, you have to make the transaction done. In a buy side role, you're probably one of 10 buyers, who, even if the transaction gets done, you're not only betting on the transaction being done, but you're also betting on you winning the transaction. So the probability of making a fee is much lower. So generally, sell side roles are referred, when we talk about sell side roles, we are talking about advisory roles where you're helping a set of shareholders or a company to sell a stake in the company, or shareholders to sell a stake in the company that they own. And this could take a form of either you're selling an existing stake or you're selling new shares in a company to raise capital, right? So that's broadly what a sell side role is. And what it entails is um, understanding the business of a company, packaging the business in the most interesting and attractive manner, i.e., marketing the business story. Um, Coming up with the valuation and presenting the valuation to prospective buyers, then reaching out to prospective buyers all over the world if it's a global deal, to try and solicit bids from them, and then running the process of the auction, where you are talking to many buyers and helping them diligence the company and ultimately effecting a sale. So that's the role of a sell side banker. Within an investment bank, of course, this is an M&A role that I explained, but there is also a role where you are selling, where a company is actually coming to market, i.e., doing an IPO, where they are selling their shares for the first time on an exchange. And that is what, also, it's also a sell side role where you play the role of a book runner. What that means is you are taking the company, you are again running an auction, but this time you're running an auction with multiple players, not just a handful of players, 5 players, 10 players, buyers, but you're going to you're listing a company. So effectively, prior to listing, you're marketing it to hundreds of institutional investors. So that's also a sell side role. Now, within uh, these kind of sell side roles, there are various nuances. You can be a sector specialist, you can be a product specialist. So you can either do capital markets or M&A. You can sell bonds of a company, et cetera, or you can sell equity. So, but all of this is encompassing a sell side role. Now, there is another side to an investment bank, or also investors themselves, like a private equity fund or an institutional investor, who are actually buying these companies, these shares in companies. So, for example, if you're an institutional investor, let's say you're part of a large fund which has raised money from several insurance companies, several pension funds, etc. You're managing money for them. What you're trying to do is you're trying to look for opportunities in the public market generally to invest, and I'm talking about equity, but it could be currency, it could be commodities, etc., where you're looking to take the funds that have been given to you to manage and investing in thematics, in companies, in sectors, in ETFs, which you think will make money, make the returns for your investor. That's a buy side role. Now, the buy side role could also be a private equity role, where you're basically part of a private equity firm. Various insurance companies, pension funds, again, have given you money. They're called limited partners. You have raised a fund, you've raised a $10 billion fund, and you are investing in private companies, non-listed companies, to make money for them. And then you get a share of the gains that you make for these investors. So that's a buy side role. And again, a buy side role again could be uh, different asset classes. So it could be real estate, it could be consumer companies, it could be uh, companies. There could be alternate investments. So for example, it could be hedge funds, etc. So there are various strategies, but in general, various asset class. But in general, that's the buy side. Um, we are owned by private equity, an infra investor, basically private equity. And the role of a private equity is to take the funds that they have raised from institutional investors, like I said, and put it to play, which means invest in companies like us, because they back management teams, back companies to grow. And then at some point of time, the private equity will sell to somebody else. Could be another private equity, could be another data center company in our case, etc. And that's how they will make their returns, right? Now, when we started, we were a management team with two seed assets, and that was backed by our private equity owner. Over a period of time, we have invested and now are 18 assets plus another 30 smaller assets, which are called edge sites. And we are now in 5 countries. When we started, we were only in one country. And the idea is to keep on growing. So as a company, we want to keep acquiring assets, keep growing, keep buying data centers, building data centers, expanding data centers. And, in each of the data centers, we keep, selling the capacity in the data centers to customers. So that's how we will, at some point of time, our private equity owner might decide. So they raise funds for a certain period of time, 10 years, 15 years, whatever. So in the first 2, 3 years, they will invest and they will start thinking of exiting, as in selling their investment, say from year 6 onwards. So at some point of time, they will think of exiting because we would have grown, they would have, invested, they would have made sufficient returns on their capital and they would want to sell. So what is my role? My role is basically focused on growth, which means any new investment that we make in existing countries that we are in, or in any new countries that we want to be in, enter, any JVs that we do, any kind of acquisitions that we want to make of existing businesses, all of that falls under my purview. And of course, with the idea that we are scaling up. So, it's basically growth that I'm focused on. And associated with this is obviously, raising the financing. So, if it is debt funded, for example, then going to banks and making sure that they provide us the acquisition loans at good terms so that we can use that money to acquire. So that's also, part of my purview.
Okay. Yeah, thank you so much. I mean, I
Not at all.
really enjoyed this talk with you today and learned a lot more about you as a person, of course, but also BDX and this whole sector of sell side, buy side, all the different various aspects of that. So I appreciate you talking so detailed about it today.
Not at all. Been a pleasure, and Saksham, all the best. It's a good objective that you are trying to achieve.